Welcome back to Traveling Dice. This is Jason. I have another hobby tip for you today, which is magnetizing bases. I am a big proponent of magnetizing bases because I do end up traveling for various Warhammer games and other tabletop miniature games. So just having it magnetized, having it already ready to go, as opposed to packing it up in a bunch of different foam trays. Having everything magnetized also really makes deployment particularly efficient while on the road. So the main material I use for this is a 8x12 piece of sheet metal that I purchased at Home Depot. Now I get this in the roofing section. In my Home Depot, it's all the way in the front left-hand corner. I don't know if they're all laid out the same or not, but it's definitely in the front corner. And it's by Shingles, and it come in this 8x12 rectangular piece, and I want to say they're $1.98. Now, granted, the prices on stuff is fluctuating right now, so who knows when you go and get it, but you can make a lot of bases for this. And when I'm magnetizing stuff, really I'm looking at one of two things. I'm either going to put a magnet on the miniature and have a metal tray that they sit on, or put the metal on the miniature and then have the magnet in the tray. I tend to put the metal on the miniature. So I trace the cav base that I have there. I'm working on a unit of Marauders currently, and I need 5 of these bases. So I just trace each one of these. Now I can't stress this enough. This sheet metal stuff is pretty sharp. Even that rectangular piece you get at Home Depot is fairly sharp on the edges. But when you start cutting it with those tin snips, it is just razor sharp at certain areas. So you have to do this with extreme caution. And you really need to conduct yourself as though you are handling a bunch of small razor blades, because you effectively are. So although it's efficient, although I think it's relatively cheap and actually works really well, it works better than some other metals that I've tried, or some pre-cut metal bases that I've tried before, you have to be very, very careful. I don't want to understate that. So I go really slowly. I'm methodical. I'm also very careful about the disposal of scrap pieces of this. I don't just set it in the trash can and walk away, knowing that either I or a family member might come in and push the trash down. So you really have to be mindful of that. But once I get my initial piece cut out, I deliberately have it slightly too big, and what I find is that that initial cut is not flat. And when I go and remove just a little bit of material all the way around the perimeter, I can't really explain why, but really consistently it comes out super flat and actually not that sharp. Now I have a file nearby, so I'll kind of gingerly fill the edges of what's going to be on my base. I don't want anything super sharp. I certainly don't want any burrs sticking out. So I will hit it with a file if it's required, which I would say is, roughly a third of the time I feel like, okay, I got to also hit this with a file. Now, the long wiry scrap that comes off of that cut is just super dangerous. And I'm very mindful about handling this. I'm very mindful about where it is. I actually keep a empty jelly jar, a glass jar, and I set them in there, and I make sure that I'm disposing of those in a very mindful way. I don't want any person to encounter them, and yeah, they're sharp, so you can definitely cut yourself on these various pieces. But the final product is smooth, so I want to stress that too. Now, I use these clamps when I'm gluing it down just as an insurance policy that it's gluing on and it's gluing on flat. So I like to put the magnet on before I put the miniature on the base, which allows me to use the clamps. If the miniature's on there already, you really can't use the clamps. So you can still work it with the miniature if you're magnetizing an army that already exists. But if I'm doing a new project, I definitely like to put the magnet on before I put the miniature on. And I also tend to use the magnet as a priming technique. Here you see me using that file, so I do want to stress this. I check every single one of these bases. I don't want there to be just floating around something that's, super sharp or jagged on the bottom of any of my miniatures, because I know I'm going to be handling them later. I know my son's going to be handling them, etc. So using this system, you do have to go through this, I think, pretty meticulously. But what I love about it is it's pretty affordable. You can get 10 of those sheets for like 20 bucks. So here's one of my movement trays with the magnetic strip already inside. I do this pretty much with all of my movement trays once they're done. And just to demonstrate here the strength of this magnet, especially with a plastic model. Sometimes with the metal models, they can be a little top heavy, but plastic models, they are not going anywhere. And I feel very confident I can hit a speed bump or gravelly road and the models are going to be secure. What I do in my transport box is I have another magnetic strip and then metal pieces on the bottom of the movement tray as well. So the movement tray is magnetically held to the box. The models are magnetically held to the movement tray. So I hope you enjoyed this episode. If you did, please consider liking and subscribing. Bye for now.